Hi there, I am the book lady. I bring 2 books and we read them and talk about them. Oh, I'm so glad you're with me today because I brought some old books. These books were written a long time ago, but they're still good books, and I think you're going to enjoy them very much. This one is May I Bring a Friend? And it's, now, the author's name is kind of a long, complicated one, so I want to read it and make sure we get it just right. Beatrice Schenk de Regniers. And the pictures are kind of what drew me in. They're very interesting. The colors, some pages don't have colors, but other pages have very odd colors. They're not colors we see all the time in books nowadays. And it's just a very sweet book, and we're going to enjoy it, okay? Then the next book, this is a really old book. It was published in 1941. That's a long time ago. That's older than the book lady. Now this one was published in 1964. So I'm older than this book, but I'm really old. Okay, Make Way for Ducklings. This is a sweet book. I learned some things, you will too. And I mean, look at those little pictures. Look at those little ducks. That will be the second book we read, okay? Let's start out with May I Bring a Friend? Now, a lot of this book rhymes. Do you know what rhymes means? It means words that sound the same. Yes, like hat and cat. There you go. Or C and B. So listen for the rhyming in this book. May I Bring a Friend? The king and queen invited me to come to their house on Sunday for tea. I think the rhyme, invited me for tea. See? I told the queen, and the queen told the king, I had a friend I wanted to bring. The king told the queen, my dear, any friend of our friend is welcome here. So I brought my friend. Whoa. The king said, hello. He said, how do you do? The queen said, well, fancy meeting you. Look what he brought. He brought his friend, the giraffe. My friend sat down right next to me. Then everyone had a cup of tea. I like the way the giraffe's legs are up on the table. The king and queen said, we are having stew on Monday for dinner, and we want you to come. I told the queen, and the queen told the king, I had a friend I wanted to bring. The king told the queen, oh, my dear, any friend of our friend is welcome here. So I brought my friend. Whoa! He brought his friend, the hippo. And look at those colors. Aren't they great? They're all just bright, but they're different. I like them. And I like the way he's trying to bring his friend the hippo up all those steps. And I think the king and queen, do you see them at the top of the steps? And they just can't wait. My friend sat down next to the king. And when dinner was over, there wasn't a thing left to to eat. I wouldn't imagine. And that hippo's so cute. His little smile, I love it. The king and queen sent me a card. Come for lunch on Tuesday. Please try hard to come. So I sent a card. Dear Queen and King, I have a friend I want to bring. The king and queen sent me a letter. They said, the more friends you bring, the better. So I brought more friends. Holy cow, or I should say, holy monkey. The king said, hello. The queen gave me a kiss and said, what monkey business is this? Oh my gosh, let's count the monkeys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I count 10 monkeys. Wow. They hung from the roof. They sat on the floor. They ate, and they ate till there wasn't any more to eat. Oh, and they were kind of messy. The king and the queen sent a man with a horn to ask me to come on Wednesday morn for breakfast. Doo, 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 doo. I told the man to tell the king I had a friend I'd like to bring. The king told the man, please tell my dear friend that his friend is welcome here. So I brought my friend. The king said, hello, and the queen said with a frown, I don't know where your friend can sit down. So we sat on my friend. And look at that wonderful picture. They climbed up on the elephant and they're having their meal on top of the elephant. Doesn't that look like fun? Please, said the king. And please, said the queen. Come on Thursday for Halloween. And we want you to know, said the queen and the king, you can bring any friends you would like to bring. So I came and brought my friends. Hello, said the king and the queen. Now, who can this be? And will you look at all of them have their masks on for Halloween? Then the lions roared, and they knew I was me. Look at those wonderful lions. And I love the way they're drawn just with little, someone took like a pen or something and they really look like lions. The queen said to me, do come on Friday. Yes, said the king. It is apple pie day. I said to the queen, well, will you tell the king I have a friend I want to bring? The queen told the king, who said, my dear, any friend of our friend is welcome here. So I brought my friend. The king said, hello. The queen said, wee. Let's hear you play. Oh, say, can you see? It's a seal. My friend played a song called Long Live Apple Pie. Then the king played a while, and so did I. The king and the queen invited me to come on Saturday for tea. No, my friends wanted you instead to come and visit them, I said. So, that is why the king and the queen and I and all my friends were seen on Saturday at 2:30 having tea at the city zoo. And there's a little picture at the end, and what does it say? The end. Isn't that? I just like the book. And look, there they are at the zoo. And do you see the king and the queen? There, and all the animals. There's the seal. May I bring a friend? Wasn't that a fun book? And this is an old book. Yes. It's probably the age of some of your grandparents. But it doesn't matter because it's still a very good book. And it's fun and colorful, and you can read old books. They're okay. Now here's a really old one. And don't you love this cover page? Look, what do we have here? We have an egg. Uh-oh, it has a little crack in it. Little more. Something's coming out of that egg. What is it? Why, it's a little... And here we go with Make Way for Ducklings by Robert McCloskey. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were looking for a place to live, but every time Mr. Mallard saw what looked like a nice place, Mrs. Mallard said it was no good. There were sure to be foxes in the woods or turtles in the water, and she was not going to raise a family where there might be foxes or turtles. So they flew on. When they got to Boston, Boston is a large city in Massachusetts. When they got to Boston, they felt too tired to fly any further. There was a nice pond in the public garden with a little island on it. Ah, the very place to spend the night, quacked Mr. Mallard. So down they flapped. Next morning, they fished for their breakfast in the mud at the bottom of the pond. But they didn't find much. Just as they were getting ready to start on their way, a strange, enormous bird came by. It was pushing a boat full of people, and there was a man sitting on its back. "Good morning," quacked Mr. Mallard, being polite. The big bird was too proud to answer. But the people on the boat threw peanuts in the water, so the Mallards followed them all around the pond and got another breakfast. Better than the first. "I like this place," said Mrs. Mallard as they climbed out on the bank and waddled along. "Why don't we build a nest and raise our ducklings right in this pond? There are no foxes and no turtles, and the people feed us peanuts. What could be better?" "Good," said Mr. Mallard, delighted that at last Mrs. Mallard had found a place that suited her. But, "Look out!" squawked Mrs. Mallard, all a dither. "You'll get run over." And when she got her breath, she added, "This is no place for babies with all those horrid things rushing about. We'll have to look somewhere else." It was a bicycle. So they flew over Beacon Hill, that's a section of Boston, and around the State House, but there was no place there. They looked in Louisburg Square, but there was no water to swim in. Then they flew over the Charles River. "This is better," quacked Mrs. Mallard. "That island looks like a nice quiet place, and it's only a little way from the public garden." "Yes, yes," said Mrs. Mallard, remembering the peanuts. "That looks just like the right place to hatch ducklings." Right in that little island. That does look like a good place. So they chose a cozy spot among the bushes near the water and settled down to build their nest. And only just in time, for now they were beginning to molt. Molt. Can you say that? It's not melt, it's molt. All their old wing feathers started to drop out, and they would not be able to fly again until the new ones came in. Well, well, well. But of course they could swim, and one day they swam over to the park on the riverbank, and there they met a policeman called Michael. Michael fed them peanuts, and after that the Mallards called on Michael every day. Oh, I bet they did. After Mrs. Mallard had laid 8 eggs in the nest, she couldn't go to visit Michael anymore because she had to sit on the eggs and keep them warm. She moved off the nest only to get a drink of water or to have her lunch or to count the eggs and make sure they were all there. One day, the ducklings hatched out. First came Jack, then Cack, and then Lack, then Mack and Knack and Whack and Pack and Quack. Mr. and Mrs. Ballard were bursting with pride. It was a great responsibility taking care of so many ducklings, and it kept them very busy. Oh, look at that. One day, Mr. Ballard decided he'd like to take a trip to see what the rest of the river was like further on. So off he set. "I'll meet you in a week in the public garden," he quacked over his shoulder. So he said it like this: "I'll meet you in a week at the public garden. Take good care of the ducklings." "Oh, don't you worry," said Mrs. Mallard. "I know all about bringing up children." And she did. She taught them how to swim and dive. Diving is important for a duck because a lot of their food is down underneath the water. She taught them to walk in a line, to come when they were called, and to keep a safe distance from bikes and scooters and other things with wheels, like cars and baby strollers, maybe even kids on roller skates. When at last she felt perfectly satisfied with them, she said one morning, "Come along, children, follow me." Before you could wink an eyelash, Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack fell into line just as they had been taught. Mrs. Mallard led the way into the water, and they swam behind her to the opposite bank. I think this picture is wonderful. Look at them. And it took 2 pages to do this picture. Look at that. Isn't it wonderful? Oh, let's see what happens. There they waded ashore and waddled along till they came to the highway. Uh-oh. There are lots of things with wheels in the highway. Mrs. Mallard stepped out to cross the road. Honk, honk, went the horns on the speeding cars. Quack, went Mrs. Mallard as she tumbled back again. Quack, 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 went Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack. just as loud as their little quackers could quack. The cars kept speeding by and honking, and Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings kept right on quack, quack, quacking. Woo! They made such a noise that Michael came running, waving his arms and blowing his whistle. Oh, he's running off. He planted himself in the center of the road. He raised one hand to stop the traffic and then beckoned with the other, the way policemen do, for Mrs. Mallard to cross over. Oh, wasn't that nice? As soon as Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings were safe on the other side and on their way down Mount Vernon Street, Michael rushed back to the police booth. He called Clancy at headquarters and said, "There's a family of ducks walking down the street." Clancy said, "Oh, family of what? Ducks? Send a police car, quick!" Oh, this is getting exciting. Meanwhile, Mrs. Mallard had reached the corner bookshop and turned into Charles Street with Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Quack, and Pack, and Quack, all marching in line behind her. Isn't that cute? Everyone stared. An old lady from Beacon Hill said, "Oh, isn't that amazing?" And the man who swept the street said, "Well, now ain't that nice?" And when Mrs. Mallard heard them, she was proud, and she tipped her nose in the air and walked along with an extra swing in her waddle. She's proud of her 8 babies. When they came to the corner of Beacon Street, there was the police car with 4 policemen that Clancy had sent from headquarters. The policemen held back the traffic so Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings could march across the street. What a wonderful sight. Do you see them? There they are. Held all those big cars back to let them cross. Right into Public Garden. There they go. Inside the gate, they all turned round to say thank you to the policeman. The policeman smiled and waved goodbye. When they reached the pond and swam across to the little island, there was Mr. Mallard waiting for him, just as he had promised. "Oh, there's Daddy." The ducklings liked the new island so much that they decided to live there. All day long, they follow the swan boat and eat peanuts. And when night falls, they swim to their little island and go to sleep. The end. Did you like that? It's a sweet story. Now, let me ask you something. Now, here where I live, we see geese, lots of geese. Now, a goose is bigger than a duck. A goose can be really big, whereas a duck's a little smaller. But they make nests, they lay eggs, they protect their eggs, they like to be near water. They have some similarities. And I'm telling you, when I see a goose wanting to cross the street, I stop my car and I let that mama goose go. And she often has 2 or 3. I don't think they usually have 8 babies. And they do walk in a line and cross. I think most of us value those special birds. And we know that they're much smaller than a car. And we might be in a hurry, but we're not in that much of a hurry. And it's probably the right thing to stop your car and let these fine birds cross, because they're trying to get back to their nest or get to some water. Have you ever seen a goose or a duck try and cross a street? I don't know if it's the law, but I think the right thing to do is to stop and let them cross. And if you're riding a bicycle or you're out walking and your mom's pushing a stroller, back off, let the animals, well, they're not really animals. They are considered birds or waterfowl. That's a big grown-up word. Let them cross. And they're not going to hurt you. However, when I was a little girl, we went to a park and there was a goose there. And if you have one goose, you have 4 geese. Did you know that? It's like one mouse, mice. Isn't that funny? But that's the way English is. So there were some geese. There was a pond in this park. And I thought I'd go pet one of the geese. Big mistake. Big mistake. You don't do that. That goose chased after me and was nipping at me, trying to bite me. I don't know if they have teeth, but it scared me to death. To this day, I respect the goose because they really don't want you near them. Just leave them alone, and they want to leave you alone. Yeah, but they're very fun to watch, and I love to watch ducks. When they're on the water, they just move across. And underneath, though, if you saw their feet are just going because they have webbed feet. Do you know what that means? Here are their feet. In between their feet, their toes, they have skin. And that makes it much easier to swim, and they can go faster and further. Yeah, it's called webbed feet. Now, the big bird they were talking about at the beginning, oh, let's see, where is that? And they were a little bit afraid of that bird. That is a swan. And swans are beautiful birds, and they have long necks. They come in white, but I want you to know I have seen black swans, and there may be other colors. But this wasn't a real bird. That bird is carved out of wood. That's why there's a man on its back. And these boats are for the people. They can ride it and just take a nice quiet ride. And they probably can buy a little bag of peanuts, and they were throwing them to the ducks. And the ducks said, "This is great." So that's not a real swan. That's what a swan looks like. I think that's much bigger than a swan. A swan is about the same size as a goose. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this book. I enjoyed reading it to you, and I hope you will come back and tell your friends. When you want to see the Book Lady read a book, I also read them on YouTube. Yes. And you can watch anytime. Oh, we have so much fun. I think it's about time for me to go to the library. Until next time, I'm the Book Lady. Bye-bye.